It's not a perfect deal, but it's a deal that's better than the Meechlek Accord.
I'll probably be voting for the separation, for no, for the Constitution.
The no vote seems to me to be a separatist's vote.
Maybe my answer would be
Quebec needs Canada as much as Canada needs Quebec.
well, what does it change anyway? I think this is a big, ugly gimmick.
Welcome to Faces in the Community. I'm Mike Kleinerman and this is Howard Silbiger. On today's show, we have what's coming up on October 26th, the referendum. We have interviews with Greg Logan,
Robert Libman,
and people on the street of downtown Montreal.
The Constitutional Accord. Do we really know what it's all about?
Do we know if the public is well informed?
Those are some of the questions we asked Robert Libman and Greg Logan. Here's what Robert Libman had to say.
Mr. Libman, exactly what is the Canada Clause and why is it relevant to what's going on?
Well, the Canada Clause lists certain characteristics of what Canada is all about. It says that the entire Constitution must be interpreted in a manner consistent with a series of principles. One of those principles is the recognition of Quebec as a state society by virtue of its majority language, culture, and civil law tradition. Another very important element which directly affects the speaking minority of Quebec is a clause that speaks of the government's commitment to the vitality and development of the minority community. What we have now in the Constitution is a list of criteria that characterize Canada, which basically are there to guide the course and interpreting legislation. They have to take into consideration all these elements of the Canada when they look at the end.
Why is it important for Quebec to be a distinct society?
Well, personally, I think that Quebec does not need this recognition in the Constitution. Nothing since 1867, nothing since 1960 has constrained Quebec into developing its potential, creativity, its ability to adapt to a changing world. I think that the society clause is not necessary. It's nothing but a political game that Quebec politicians have been wrestling for many years. But nonetheless, it's become a necessary ingredient in order to have a constitutional deal, and therefore we have to recognize the importance of this constitution.
Do you think the Aboriginal people got a good deal?
I think they got a very good deal out of the Accord. I think that the concerns that we must have, though, about the depth and complications that could come out of the aspects of the deal with the natives. I think this is where the legal text will have more importance than anything else. Exactly what it means, what the implications are, whether it will paralyze the functioning of our country in years from now. I think we have to be very careful in analyzing exactly what the impact of the native provisions are in the Charlottetown Agreement.
Should Mulroney resign if the answer is no?
Well, I don't think so. Mulroney was elected by people of Canada in 1988. We have a system in this country where an elected government has a maximum of 5 years to serve. If the no side fails and Canadians want to elect someone else in the next federal election, that's our democratic system. But he is given a mandate to govern for a maximum of 5 years, and he has every right to govern the way he wants for those 5 years, and then the people will make the ultimate decision.
Why should somebody vote for the Canada Accord if they didn't vote for Meechlek?
Well, I'm in that unenviable position. I was against the Meechlek Accord, but now I'm in favor of the Charlottetown Agreement, and it goes back to what you asked earlier, the Canada Clause. In Meechlek, there was only the distinct society interpreted. In the Charlottetown Agreement, the potential legal impact of the distinct society is balanced by the inclusion of this commitment to the vitality and development of the minority community, which makes it very unlikely the judges will have a less exacting standard of human rights when they interpret legislation. So I feel comfortable about it. I think that takes the discriminatory edge off the distinct society cause and leaves me with more comfort in accepting this accord where I was unable to accept the new statement.
Is the government educating the public enough to make a rational decision on the referendum date?
Well, I think in some instances the government has been educating the population too much. We have a complicated accord in front of us, which is fairly understandable if you take the time to read it. We're voting on the basis of this agreement. We've seen complete bombardment of media coverage on the issue. So I think if people are willing to follow the issue and inform themselves, there's enough information out there for them to understand what's in it. But I think that when I say that they've over-educated the public, I don't think the commas and the exact aspects of this accord are that crucial. What we've got to realize here is we're not only voting on the wording of this accord, we're voting on a political dynamic in Quebec. If this accord fails, we're giving great momentum to the forces that want to break up this country. If the accord passes, Quebec's signature is on the Constitution, and I think we'll put these separatist questions to rest for a considerable amount of time. We'll at least take the wind out of their sails to the point where they can no longer say that they speak for the majority of Quebecers.
So what occurs if a Quebecer doesn't like the accord, yet doesn't want Quebec to separate from the rest of Canada? How should that Quebecer vote?
Well, this is the dilemma that many English-speaking Quebecers find themselves in right now, as well as constitutional purists like Pierre Trudeau, who do not like the deal, are federalists, and say that we should vote specifically on the merits of the deal. It's a very difficult decision. I am one who is not willing to take the risk of the consequences of the deal's failure, and therefore I'm supporting the accord. To vote no is taking a chance. People might be willing to take the chance. I'm not willing to take the chance. And that's the very difficult decision that they're going to be faced with on October 26th. Do they vote against it and take the risk? They have a legitimate democratic right to do so. I'm sincerely and genuinely worried about the consequences of the deal fails. And therefore, despite my reservations about the deal, I'm going to hold my nose and vote yes.
But there is no guarantee that Quebec will separate if the vote comes in yes.
There's no guarantee it will separate. But you think of the dynamic here. If Quebecers say no on the 26th, the perception created will be that the deal did not go far enough. Not that it went too far, as we would like to say, but if the deal fails, it will be perceived as not going far enough. So any subsequent deal will be a deal that goes further, will be a deal that probably reinforces the distinct society clause. So what I'm saying is this, given all the circumstances, is probably the best deal we can anticipate. Because if the deal fails, we're not just going to wipe the slate clean and go back to the status quo and have the status quo just continue as we would prefer, but we will see a dynamic created where one of two things will happen. Either we're going to finally renegotiate a new deal that goes further, so Quebec could say yes eventually, or we will move on the path towards sovereignty. One of those two options. I would be the first person to support the no side if I knew that its failure just meant the status quo. But unfortunately, that's not the reality. The deal fails, the perception will be that Quebec did not get enough. Maybe we should give Quebec a bit more.
Can't the no vote make the First Minister sit down and hash out another deal?
But if the no vote wins, as I said, it will be perceived as Quebec did not get enough. So if the First Minister sit down at the table, it will be to try and sweeten the pot, to try to give Quebec more so Quebec can say yes in the next referendum. And the first thing that will go in these new negotiations is like powder development costs. And they will try to give a few more powers to Quebec. Okay, fine, we'll give you a bit more, maybe you can accept it. So to English-speaking Quebecers, that is a worse scenario than the one we have before us now, where we have a deal, it's not the end of the world, and probably the best we can hope for given all the circumstances.
What does Quebec offer young Anglophons still in Quebec?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is convincing young Anglophones to remain in Quebec. And I've given a lot of speeches to CUTV universities in Quebec trying to convince young Anglophones to stay here. Many do not see a future for themselves here, but what I tell them is the following. The fact that the world is moving in a certain direction towards economic union. And I think in North America, the same phenomenon will happen in the next 10, 15 years. That in order for Quebec, Canada, and North America to be competitive with the economic blocs in the rest of the world, we've got to move towards a much larger economic union. We see it developing with the North American Free Trade Agreement. So what young Anglophones can look for is that Quebec will realize in the future that in order to be able to compete, Quebec has to be more open to North American reality, not less open to it. The language of trade, of commerce, of telecommunications, of technology in North America is English. And who better to be a window on this North American reality than young, bilingual, educated Anglophones in Quebec? A very high price might be on the heads of young bilingual Anglophones in Quebec. You could play a very important role in the Quebec of the not-too-distant future, bridging that gap. Young Anglophones in Quebec understand the tendencies, the marketing habits, the psyche of Americans. And we, therefore, can play a very important role in bridging that gap as Quebec realizes that we've got to be more open to the English and North American reality as opposed to going in the opposite direction.
Why are certain members of your party voting no?
Well, at an assembly, many delegates decided that they would be voting no. That's due to a lack of confidence in the Liberal government of Quebec, who have passed legislation that suspend individual rights of the minority communities in Quebec. And therefore, people don't trust Bourassa and any package he comes up with. And they're concerned about the impact of the Distinct Society Clause on minority rights. And they're willing to take the consequences of risking the country's breakup to vote no in this referendum. I've weighed all these concerns personally against the consequences of Deal's breakup, and I've decided that I will be voting yes because I'm worried about the consequences of Deal's breakup. Some others are willing to take the risk, and it's a personal choice that everyone may be willing to make.
Thank you very much.
As a young Anglo-Canadian, why should I vote no?
I don't know if you should vote no just because you're a young Anglo-Canadian. I think that Canadians should vote no overall, irrespective of what their language is, culture, tradition, whatever it might be. Looking at the Charlottetown Consensus Report, what we see are a few very, very dangerous areas. For example, in the area of individual rights, they're being increasingly buried under this notion of collective rights. There is a priority of rights given to different classifications of people. I think it's difficult for a country that claims itself to be progressive to try and establish a society where respect for the dignity and rights of the individual will be realized if we put through the Charlottetown deal. There are a lot of notables that have come out and talked about what they're calling the hierarchy of rights. Some call it a priority scale. And it's not just people on the no side like Pierre Trudeau or Deborah Coyne or some others. There are people on the yes side that have affirmed this recently. The most respected editorialist in Quebec, arguably, Alain Dubuc of La Presse, came out and stated categorically that there is a definite priority given to certain collectivities in the Canada Clause of the Charlottetown deal, and he specified distinct society as being much more important in terms of the framers' intention than the promotion of linguistic minorities. So he stated that clearly. Yves Fortier, who was the Canadian ambassador to the UN and a lawyer, himself stated that clearly the framers intended here to have distinct society carry more weight before the highest tribunes or courts in the land than the promotion of a minority community, linguistically speaking. So this whole notion is a very difficult one for us to accept as Canadians if we believe in individual rights and freedoms. Then you carry on consistent with this whole notion of hierarchy of rights. We're about to entrench in the Constitution government by virtue of ethnicity, of race, under the Aboriginal provisions. I think everyone agrees that we have to do something that is forward-thinking for Aboriginal communities. But go and ask Aboriginal women if they like the kind of deal that is being proposed here. The overwhelming majority don't, in fact. So that's a clear and present danger also to establish what are in effect racial homelands that will not really have access to the Charter in a meaningful way. There's a non-derogation clause in the Charlottetown deal that simply overrides Charter provisions, and there is no provision whatsoever to ensure that people would have access to the democratic process if they wanted it. Now, of course, some would argue, well, traditionally there have been hereditary chiefs, and it's been that way. So, why are we worried about it staying the way it's been? I don't think that's a valid argument. Because it's been a certain way doesn't mean that it's the right way. Slavery was entrenched in the Constitution of the United States in 17 1987, and in fact it didn't make it right. So what has been is not a guarantee of what will be in the future in terms of right and wrong. It's simply what has been. And I think we should move forward and respect the idea that an individual should have access to justice, and at the level of the highest court in the land. And if it turns out that Aboriginal government, which is male-dominated, is as benign as some would claim, then the people living in the communities would never need to use the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But if they ever do, I think it's the responsible thing for Canadian society to do, to make it at least available, with the understanding that if they don't need it, they don't need it, but that we shouldn't deny them access to it in case they ever do need it. There are a host of things in the Charlottetown deal that are incredible dangers for Canada. If you look at the devolution of powers, in and of themselves, I suppose we as a society could probably live with the limit to which they've gone, but we're at the limit. How much further will we go in decentralizing Canada and creating a balkanized country with provincial baronies? It seems to me that if we're to listen to Mr. Bourassa, his argument right now is the Allaire report is Liberal Party policy, and that it's not a question of getting it immediately, like they would have liked, but just to get it bit by bit over time. So as far as I'm concerned, how can we possibly accept this unless all political parties in Quebec are prepared to renounce or denounce the Allaire report as the basis for building Quebec in the future? Once this is, if it should be ratified, and I don't think it will be, but if it were to be ratified, you would see the Liberal Party in the next provincial election, or the Parti Québécois, going to the wall to try and get more and more devolution of powers into the hands of the government of Quebec, slowly dismantling the federal system and the nation as a whole. So it's a question of putting the question honestly to the people in Quebec: do you want to be a part of Canada or not? And doing so quickly, at least in the next 2 to 3 years. Or witnessing the death by 1,000 cuts, the slow hemorrhaging of federal authority and a sense of nation. This is only touching on the surface, really. There are so many contradictions and problems within the Charlottetown deal. It boggles the mind. If it wasn't such a serious subject, I think it would be nothing more than a cruel joke, frankly.
A lot of Anglophones are worried that Jacques Parizeau's recent remark.
Sorry, could you start that one again?
Okay. A lot of Anglophone Canadians are worried that due to Jacques Parizeau's recent remarks that a victory for the no vote will mean a giant step for separation. How do you feel about that?
First of all, let's bear in mind who he was speaking with at the time. If you are a sovereignist leader and you're speaking to a CEGEP group, which he was, and so was Lucien Bouchard when he made a similar comment, what are you going to say to these people? I mean, a lot of them are very interested in the notion of creating a nation state called Quebec. Now, if you say to them, well, a yes vote is going to perhaps impede our progress towards creating a nation state, do you expect them to go out there and mobilize support for the yes side? Obviously not. They need to be mobilized to generate support for the no side. A yes victory, they feel, would put a roadblock in their way. I don't know if it would put a roadblock in their way or not. What I do know is that there will be a question put to the population of Quebec, whether there's a yes vote or a no vote, and it's going to be sometime in the next few years. If anyone thinks that by voting yes, the Parti Québécois is simply going to disappear, I mean, frankly, I wish them luck if that's what their dream is. They're just not going to realize it. But what do we do by saying yes in terms of vis-a-vis sovereignty? What we end up doing is, right now, we're avoiding the real question, and yet we're slowly dismantling the federal system. In effect, we're almost handing them sovereignty on a silver platter when they do put the question to the people, because so much authority will reside with Quebec. And as Howard Pauley said, the former Premier of Manitoba recently, he said the Charlottetown deal is, for all intents and purposes, optics and creative fudge, and that, and he went on to say after that, we really should be putting the real question to the people of Quebec. Do you want to be part of Canada or not? He went on to argue after that through the Charlottetown deal, when the real question is is put to Quebec, should it decide at some point for sovereignty, it's going to have that much more legitimacy within the international community because of the Charlottetown deal. Now, that's something that Howard Pawley says, and he's not a sovereignist, he's a federalist. But he recognizes here that we're slowly dismantling the federal system. We are giving to the government of Quebec that much more legitimacy within the international community in terms of having its sovereignty recognized, because we're virtually giving it to them now.
Do you feel the government's educating the public enough to make a valid choice in the vote?
I think the government at the federal level is not educating the public at all. What they're doing is they've put together a series of constitutional amendments. Looked at in isolation, not all, but the majority of them would be rejected by Canadians. So what they've done is they've put them all together, wrapped it up in the Canadian flag, and said, if you don't say yes to this, it's the end of the country. If people consider that providing information to Canadians, then I have a different opinion from them entirely. That's not providing information, it's propaganda. In fact, I would go so far as to say that they're engaging in a little bit of extortion and political blackmail to try and get things to go their way. The information provided from the no side deals with the heart of the issue itself. It's raising very serious questions, concerns, and pinpointing certain dangers that the federal government is not. Is the provincial government doing any better? No. None of the provincial governments are doing better because they are all part of this Yes coalition for their own electoral purposes, I would imagine. So they're all part of the Yes coalition, and they're doing what the federal government is doing. So it's not so much providing information as it is saying, here's the text, which most people are not overly concerned with. Here's the text of the deal. We say it's the greatest thing for Canada and we'll never do any better. No, I just don't accept it. We can't do better. I'm not saying we'll do better on the 27th of October. This is going to be a dead issue for a little while once this deal goes down, and it will likely be, and rightfully so, several years before we want to pick it up again.
So the legal text really has no relevance in the whole thing. It's just a political ploy by the Yes campaign?
I don't think it's a political ploy. I mean, the legal text is useful for people who want to take the time to read it.
Would the average layman know what legal text talks about?
The average layman can know by reading the legal text, even reading the consensus report, what is in there. But the difference is that you can't simply read through it and expect to understand the contradictions. What you have to do is compare clause with clause. You have to look at the Canada clause, and as much as a lot of it sounds nice, you then have to go to try and find within the consensus report the non-derogation clauses, subsection 3 or section 2, which in effect eliminate much of what is said in the Canada clause in terms of guarantees for rights, etc., as an interpretive clause. So a lot of people, I'm not so sure that it's not that they can't do it, but are they going to bother to do it? To sit down and analyze it, comparing clause to other clauses. I suspect that by and large they won't. What they're doing is they're expecting to learn by listening to the leaders in the country, the politicians, various other community leaders and what have you, and then making a decision on that. I just hope that in the final analysis, any decision that is made by someone, whether it's yes or no, and there are honorable arguments on both sides, I imagine, but that the decision is based on the intrinsic merit of the deal, if there is any, or on the demerits of the deal, of which I think there are many, and that it's not based exclusively on a strategic consideration. I don't think that by trying to vote on a strategic consideration, that's any way that we can really build a solid foundation for our country and our Constitution. That's something you leave to elections, which are short-term, rather than the Constitution of a country.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not anticipating a no vote, but in the event that it is, we will have to obviously negotiate and negotiate and negotiate. There will be a period of real confusion. We will probably be the victims of an uncertainty in the financial markets, and this will cost us, the Royal Bank says, very dearly.
And to sensitize people not only as to what's in the Constitution, but furthermore how important it is to vote, and actually to go out and vote, because many students are very unaware of the voting procedures and how to get on the enumeration list. And I think that the first step is going out and voting.
To live. Concordia McGill, as we're talking about here, two fine institutions. I think there's every good reason the state of Quebec. We're all part of Quebec, we're all part of Canada.
You know, that was a wonderful interview with Robert Libman, People on the Street, and Greg Logan. You know, how I'm thinking about something right now. Are you thinking the same thing as me right now?
Yeah, what am I going to vote? I really don't know. You know, there's such convincing arguments from both sides that it's really a confusing subject.
Yeah. You think about it. Should we vote yes or should we vote no? Well, let's take the public's idea. Send in your ideas to the station on what's going to happen on October 26th, how you feel.
But of course, when October 26th does come around, which is just a few days from now, get out there and vote. Whether it be yes, whether it be no, whether it be maybe, get out there, cast your vote.
Because if you don't, just the vote is just more or less ripped up or it's given to someone else. And trust me, you don't want that because the wrong vote may come in and then you say, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to vote.
Then again, what is the wrong vote?
True, what is the wrong vote? Is the wrong vote yes or is the wrong vote no? We really don't know until the Constitution comes through.
Thank you for joining us, and
I'm Mike Kleinerman.
And I'm Howard Silbiger.
And that was our show. Thank you very much.
I'll be voting yes. I think that people in Canada are spoiled. I think we live in the most beautiful country in the world. And I feel that people want change. And what do we really want change to? I think we don't realize what we have, and we can compare Canada to other countries in the world. We have the best of all worlds.
I think Quebec will stay in Canada with no changes as far as civilized tolerance, and that's it. I think if there's something to change, should have been changed since quite a time.